I never thought I'd hear my own daughter call me a burden. After 40 years of teaching other people's children, after raising Jessica on my own when Robert died, after helping her afford the very roof over her head, I became inconvenient. But what my daughter and her husband didn't realize was that the luxury home they were so proudly showing off to their friends wasn't actually theirs to begin with. And sometimes, the only way to teach someone gratitude is to remind them exactly what they stand to lose. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My name is Margaret Sullivan, Maggie to my friends. And at 65, I thought I'd seen just about everything life could throw at a person. I spent 4 decades teaching high school English in Bedford, Massachusetts, watching generations of teenagers grow into adults, some successful, some still finding their way. But no student ever broke my heart like my own daughter would. When my husband Robert passed away 8 years ago, I didn't just lose my partner of 37 years. I lost the only person who truly understood what it meant to build something from nothing. Robert and I had grown up with parents who lived paycheck to paycheck. We promised ourselves our lives would be different. We saved. We invested wisely. Robert would clip coupons while I took on extra tutoring after school hours. While our friends upgraded to bigger houses and flashier cars, we stayed in our modest colonial, putting away every spare dollar. For Jessica's future, Robert would say, squeezing my hand, and for ours. Those investments paid off over the years. By the time Jessica graduated from Boston College, Robert and I had built a small portfolio of rental properties and a healthy retirement account. Nothing extravagant, we weren't millionaires, but comfortable enough that I could help our only daughter when she needed it. And she did need it. Often. Jessica married Eric Reynolds 5 years ago. He worked at a prestigious law firm in Boston and had the expensive tastes to match. Designer suits, country club memberships, weekend trips to Nantucket. What he didn't have was financial sense or family money to back up his lifestyle. "Mom, Eric's been offered partnership," Jessica told me over lunch one afternoon, her eyes bright with excitement. "We found the perfect house in Lexington. It's everything we've dreamed of. 5 bedrooms, a gourmet kitchen, a yard for when we have kids." I stirred my tea, already anticipating what was coming next. "But the down payment," she trailed off, looking at me hopefully. "How much?" I asked quietly. "200,000, she whispered, having the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I know it's a lot, but Eric's salary will be doubling with the partnership. We'll pay you back, I promise." I thought of Robert then, of how hard we'd worked, for every dollar. But I also thought of the joy on Jessica's face, of the grandchildren I hoped would come, of Sunday dinners in that big house with family gathered around. "Let me talk to my financial advisor," I said. I already knew what I would do. 3 weeks later, I transferred $250,000 to their account, enough for the down payment and closing costs, with a little extra for furniture. Jessica cried when I told her, throwing her arms around me like she used to when she was little. "You're the best mother in the world," she said. "This house will be your second home, I promise. You can come stay any time." I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was my daughter, my only child, my heart walking around outside my body. The twins came along a year later, Emma and Ethan, beautiful and perfect with Jessica's brown eyes and Eric's dimples. I drove 40 minutes to their house in Lexington 3 times a week to help with the babies. Jessica had quit her marketing job to stay home with them, which meant they were living solely on Eric's income. It stretched them thin, despite his partnership. "Mom, could you help us with the twins' preschool tuition?" Jessica asked when the children were 3. "It's $17,000 each, and with the mortgage and Eric's student loans." I didn't hesitate. I set up automatic transfers, $3,000 monthly, into their account. When the twins started elementary school, Jessica suggested I move closer. There's a lovely condo community just 10 minutes from us. You'd see the kids more often. We could have dinner together several times a week. It made sense. My house in Bedford felt too big, too empty without Robert. I sold it, purchased a beautiful two-bedroom condo in Lexington, and settled into a comfortable routine. Tuesday family dinners at their house, Thursday afternoons with the twins after school, Sunday brunches where Eric would regale us with stories about his important clients. I never felt like an intrusion, until I did. The first hint came last Thanksgiving. I'd arrived early to help Jessica with the cooking, bringing my famous apple pie and cranberry relish. "Oh, Mom," Jessica said when she opened the door looking flustered. "I thought you were coming at 4, not 2. "I always come early to help," I replied, confused. "Just like every year." "Well, Eric's parents are here and we're a bit crowded in the kitchen. Would you mind waiting in the living room? Or maybe you could run to the store. We forgot the good wine." I felt a flicker of something then, a small crack in the foundation of what I thought was solid. But I brushed it aside. Everyone gets stressed during the holidays. I couldn't ignore what happened at Christmas, though. That was when everything began to unravel. When I finally saw the truth that had been hiding in plain sight all along. And that's when I realized sometimes the hardest lesson to teach isn't found in any classroom. It's taught at home. When you finally show someone exactly what gratitude means and what happens when it's absent. December in New England transforms everything. The snow blanketed Lexington that year, turning the colonial-style homes along Jessica's street into something from a Hallmark movie. Twinkling lights outlined rooftops, and wreaths adorned nearly every door in the neighborhood. I've always loved Christmas. The traditions, the warmth, the chance to show people how much they mean to you through thoughtful gifts and shared moments. I spent weeks preparing for the holiday. For Emma, I found a beautiful telescope. She'd been fascinated with stars ever since we'd attended a planetarium show last summer. For Ethan, a complete set of aviation models to hang in his room. He'd been talking about becoming a pilot since his first flight to Disney World. For Jessica, I had a jeweler recreate my mother's sapphire pendant, a family heirloom I thought she should have now rather than waiting. And for Eric, I'd splurged on a vintage bottle of scotch and a first edition of his favorite law book, leather-bound and perfect for his home office. The week before Christmas, I called Jessica to confirm our plans. "We usually do Christmas Eve, at your place, and then I come over Christmas morning to watch the kids open presents," I reminded her. "I've already got everything wrapped." There was a pause on the line that lasted a beat too long. "About that, Mom." Jessica's voice had that careful tone, the one people use when they're trying to let someone down gently. "Eric's parents decided to fly in from Chicago this year. They'll be staying with us for the whole week." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely pleased. The twins would love having both sets of grandparents for Christmas. I can help set up the guest room for them. Another pause. "Well, that's the thing. They're taking the guest room, and we've converted the office into a second guest room for Eric's sister and her husband." "Oh." I processed this. "Well, that's no problem. I can sleep on the pull-out couch in the basement. I don't mind at all." "Mom," Jessica sighed. "The basement is where we're putting all the gifts and Santa setup. And honestly, with everyone here, it's going to be pretty chaotic. We were thinking maybe it would be better if you came by on the 26th instead, just for a few hours to exchange gifts." The words hit me like a physical blow. For a moment, I couldn't speak. "You don't want me there for Christmas?" I finally managed. "It's not that we don't want you," Jessica said quickly. "It's just that with Eric's whole family here, the house will be so crowded. Eric's parents haven't seen the twins in almost a year, and his sister is going through some things right now, so we really need to focus on them." "I see." I didn't. Not really. "And Christmas Eve? We're doing a special dinner just for Eric's family since they've traveled so far, but the 26th will be nice. The chaos will have died down, and we can have a proper visit. I gripped the phone tighter, trying to keep my voice steady. Jessica, I live 10 minutes away. I've been at every Christmas since the twins were born. I'm their grandmother, too. I know, Mom. And you'll still see them. Just not on Christmas Day. In the background, I heard Eric's voice. Is that your mother? Tell her we really need to figure out the sleeping arrangements. My parents can't share a bathroom. Jessica pulled away from the phone, her voice muffled as she responded to him. Then she was back. Mom, I've got to go. Eric needs help with something. We'll see you on the 26th, okay? She hung up before I could answer. I stood in my kitchen, phone still in hand, trying to process what had just happened. Excluded. That's what I was. Not important enough to include in their Christmas plans, despite living minutes away, despite helping them afford the very house they were celebrating in. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. That evening, I sat in my condo looking at the pile of wrapped presents in my living room. Each one selected with such care, such love. Now they would sit unopened until December 26th, an afterthought, just like I had become. I opened my laptop, and without really thinking about what I was doing, typed Eric Reynolds Chicago family into the search bar. His parents had a public Facebook page. I scrolled through their recent posts, curious about these people who had taken my place at Christmas. What I found made my blood run cold. A post from Edward Reynolds, dated just 3 days ago. Excited for our Caribbean cruise, setting sail. December 22nd from Miami for a week of sun and relaxation with Ellen. Merry Christmas to us. They weren't coming for Christmas. They weren't coming at all. I sat back, my mind racing. Jessica had lied to me. But why? What possible reason could she have for excluding me from Christmas with a fabricated story about houseguests? I scrolled further through Edward and Ellen Reynolds' Facebook page. Photos of a Thanksgiving dinner at a restaurant in Chicago, not at Jessica's as she'd claimed when canceling our usual plans. Comments about visiting their other grandchildren in Seattle last month, when Jessica told me they were too frail to travel. My hands began to shake. This wasn't a one-time decision. This was a pattern of deliberate exclusion, wrapped in lies, to spare my feelings, or perhaps to avoid confrontation. I picked up my phone and called Jessica back. It went straight to voicemail. I sent a text. We need to talk. I know your in-laws are on a cruise. 30 minutes later, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Jessica standing there, her expression a mixture of defiance and embarrassment. You could have just told me the truth, I said quietly, stepping aside to let her in. Jessica sank onto my couch, not meeting my eyes. We just needed a break, Mom? A Christmas just for us, me, Eric, and the kids? No extended family, no obligations, just a quiet holiday at home. But Eric's sister is coming? With her husband? Jessica fidgeted with her wedding ring. No, that wasn't true either. Why lie to me, Jessica? If you wanted space, you could have just said so. She looked up then, her face flushing. Because you make everything difficult, Mom. You don't take no for an answer. If I had said we wanted Christmas alone, you would have asked why and pushed until we gave in. You always do this. Insert yourself into our lives without considering what we want. Insert myself? The word stung like a slap. Jessica. I've only ever tried to help. Yes, help. Constant help that comes with strings attached. The money, the babysitting, the advice we never asked for. Eric says, she stopped herself, but it was too late. Eric says what? I pressed. Jessica stood up abruptly, pacing my small living room. Eric says you use your financial support to control us. That you think because you helped with the down payment, you own a piece of our home. That you don't respect our boundaries as a family. I felt as though all the air had been sucked from the room. Is that what you think too? She wouldn't look at me. Sometimes. Sometimes I feel like you don't see us as adults capable of making our own decisions. You're always there. Always. Involved. Always. Present. I'm your mother, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. And I love those children. I know. But Eric feels... We both feel that maybe it would be better if we had some space. Some independence. The room fell silent, except for the soft ticking of the clock on my mantel. Outside, snow began to fall again, delicate flakes illuminated by the streetlights. Independence, I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. From the woman who gave you $250,000 for your house. From the grandmother who pays $3,000 every month toward your children's education. Jessica winced. See? That's exactly what Eric meant. You hold those things over our heads. As I looked at my daughter, this stranger wearing my child's face, a cold clarity washed over me. In trying to give her everything, I'd somehow raised someone who valued nothing. Go home, Jessica, I said quietly. Enjoy your private Christmas. She hesitated, perhaps sensing the shift in me. Mom, go. We'll talk after the holidays. After she left, I sat alone in my quiet condo. Christmas. Lights twinkling mockingly in the window. I opened my laptop again, but this time I wasn't searching for Eric's parents. I was looking for the deed to Jessica and Eric's luxury home in Lexington. The home I had helped them buy. The home that, as I was about to discover, wasn't legally theirs at all. The day after Christmas passed in a fog. I didn't call Jessica. She didn't call me. The beautifully wrapped presents remained untouched beneath my small artificial tree, a painful reminder of the distance that had grown between us. Outside, families visited neighbors, children played with new toys in the snow, and holiday music drifted through the walls of my condo. I felt like an island, disconnected from the joy surrounding me. I poured myself a glass of wine, Robert's favorite Cabernet that I saved for special occasions, and opened my laptop. The county property records website glowed back at me in the high, dimly lit room. I had visited this site only once before, years ago, when we were closing on Jessica and Eric's house. Now I navigated it with purpose, entering their address with steady fingers. The document appeared on my screen. The deed to 47 Winchester Lane, Lexington, Massachusetts. I scanned the legal language looking for the names of the owners. There it was, in black and white. Margaret R. Sullivan and Jessica L. Reynolds as joint tenants with right of survivorship. I blinked, rereading the lines several times. I was listed as a co-owner, not just a contributor to the down payment, a legal co-owner with equal rights to the property. I remembered signing papers at the closing, but in the emotional whirlwind of helping Jessica and Eric buy their dream home, I hadn't fully processed what those documents meant. I searched through my filing cabinet and found the folder labeled Jessica's House. Inside was a copy of the deed, mortgage documents, and a letter from the attorney who had handled the closing. I skimmed the letter, certain passages jumping out at me. As we discussed, the property will be titled jointly between you and your daughter to protect your significant investment, while Mr. Reynolds will reside in the home as your daughter's spouse. He is not a titled owner. The arrangement allows you to maintain control of your investment while providing security for your daughter. Memory flooded back. The attorney, Sharon Leibowitz, had advised this arrangement specifically because of the size of my contribution. It's a significant portion of your retirement savings, she had said. This way, if anything happens, divorce, financial troubles, your investment is protected. I had agreed, thinking it was simply a technicality. Jessica knew about the arrangement. She had been sitting right next to me during that meeting, nodding along as Sharon explained the details. But did Eric know? Had Jessica told him that his name wasn't on the deed to the home he believed was his? My phone rang, startling me. Jessica's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered, "Hi, Mom." Her voice was subdued. "I thought maybe you'd want to come over tomorrow to exchange gifts with the twins. They've been asking about you." "I'd love to see the twins," I said carefully. "How was your Christmas?" "It was nice. Quiet, like we wanted. But the kids missed you." She paused. "I missed you too." The admission surprised me. "Jessica, before I come over, we need to talk about something important." "If this is about Christmas, Mom, I've already apologized." "No," I interrupted. "It's about the house." Silence stretched between us. When she spoke again, her voice was guarded. "What about the house?" "I've been looking at the property records," I said evenly. "I think we need to discuss the ownership arrangement." Another long pause. "Is this because of what happened? Are you threatening us over our Christmas plans?" The accusation stung, but I kept my voice steady. "This isn't a threat. It's a long overdue conversation about boundaries and respect. I'm simply reminding you of the legal reality of your living situation." "You're unbelievable," Jessica hissed, "using the house to punish us." "I'm not punishing anyone," I said. "But it seems you and Eric have forgotten some important facts. Facts we should discuss like adults. Eric's right here. Why don't you tell him yourself what you're planning?" Before I could respond, Eric's voice came through the phone, sharp and hostile. "Maggie, what's this about? Jessica says you're making threats about our home?" I took another sip of wine, gathering my thoughts. "Not threats, Eric. Facts. Did you know that your name isn't on the deed to the house you're living in?" His laugh was dismissive. "Of course my name is on the deed. I signed the mortgage papers." "You signed the mortgage as a borrower," I clarified. "But the actual ownership of the property is in my name and Jessica's, as joint tenants." His voice changed, uncertainty creeping in. "That's not possible." "I would know if— check the county records," I suggested. "Or ask Jessica. She was in the meeting with the attorney when this was arranged." I heard muffled voices as Eric presumably turned to Jessica. The tension through the phone line was palpable. "This is ridiculous," Eric finally said, his voice tight with anger. "You gave us that money for the down payment. It was a gift." "I never said it was a gift," I replied calmly. "I said I would help you buy the house. And I did, as a co-owner, not just a donor." "So what are you saying?" His voice rose. "That you're going to kick us out of our own home because we wanted one Christmas to ourselves?" I closed my eyes, gathering patience. "I'm not kicking anyone out. I'm simply clarifying the actual legal arrangement that's been in place all along. An arrangement your wife was fully aware of." Eric went silent. I could hear Jessica crying softly in the background. "And the money you send every month?" Eric finally asked. "Was that some kind of rent payment arrangement too?" "No," I said. "That was a grandmother trying to help her grandchildren get the best education possible. But perhaps we should formalize that arrangement as well, since you seem to have mistaken generosity for obligation." "You're manipulating us," Eric said, his lawyer's training evident in his measured tone. "Using your financial position to control our family." I thought of all the years I'd given without expectation, all the times I'd stepped in when they needed help, all the ways I'd supported them without asking for recognition. The accusation felt particularly cruel. "I have never tried to control you," I said, my voice finally betraying some emotion. "But I won't be treated like an inconvenience by the family I've sacrificed for. Not anymore." "So what do you want?" Eric demanded. "Money? More time with the kids? What's the price for you to back off?" "Respect," I answered simply. "Recognition that I am not a burden to be managed or a checkbook to be accessed when convenient. I'm family. And families don't lie to each other about holiday plans or pretend that financial support comes with no acknowledgement." "And if we don't meet your definition of respect?" Eric challenged. I took a deep breath. "Then perhaps it's time we have." A conversation about what joint tenancy really means and what options are available to me as a co-owner of the property. You wouldn't. Jessica's voice came back on the line, trembling. I don't want to, I assured her. But I won't continue to be treated as an outsider in a family I helped build either. After we hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my living room, wondering if I had gone too far. But something had shifted inside me. A lifetime of accommodating others, of putting my needs last, had reached its breaking point. I wasn't trying to punish Jessica and Eric. I was finally standing up for myself. The next morning, I received a text from Jessica. Please don't come over today. Eric is consulting with his firm's real estate attorney. We'll be in touch. So that was how it would be: legal threats instead of apologies. Lines drawn instead of bridges built. I placed the unopened Christmas presents in my guest room closet and called Sharon Leibowitz's office to schedule an appointment. If Eric wanted to handle this as a legal matter rather than a family one, I needed to be prepared. What I didn't expect was what Sharon would tell me when I sat down in her office 2 days later. Information that would change everything about my position, my power, and the future of my relationship with my daughter's family. Sharon Leibowitz's office hadn't changed in the 5 years since I'd last visited. The same leather chairs, the same wall of law books, the same framed Harvard diploma. Sharon herself looked barely different, her silver bob perhaps a shade whiter, the lines around her eyes a bit deeper, but her gaze remained sharp and assessing as I settled into the chair across from her desk. It's been a while, Maggie, she said, adjusting her reading glasses. I was surprised to get your call. I should have come sooner, I admitted. But I never thought I'd need to exercise my legal rights against my own daughter. Sharon nodded, pulling out a thick file folder labeled with my name. I've reviewed the property documents for 47 Winchester Lane. You're in a stronger position than you might realize. How so? Well, first let's clarify what joint tenancy means in Massachusetts. Sharon leaned forward, slipping into her professional demeanor. As joint tenants with right of survivorship, you and Jessica each own an undivided interest in the entire property. If either of you passes away, the survivor automatically inherits the other's share without probate. I remember that part, I said. But what does undivided interest mean practically? It means neither of you can sell or transfer your interest without the other's consent. Neither of you can be forced out by the other. And, most importantly in your situation, both of you have equal right to occupy and use the property. I processed this. So legally I could move in tomorrow if I wanted to? Sharon smiled slightly. Technically, yes, though I wouldn't recommend that approach unless you're looking to escalate tensions. What else should I know? Sharon flipped through several documents in the file. There's something else you may not remember. The significant portion of the mortgage that's been paid so far has been through an automatic withdrawal from your account. I frowned. That can't be right. They make the mortgage payments. I just send money for the children's education. According to these records, Sharon continued, the monthly mortgage payment is split. $2,100 comes directly from your account, while Eric and Jessica pay the remaining $1,800. My head spun. I'd authorized an automatic transfer when they first bought the house, intending it as temporary assistance until Eric's partnership came through. But I'd never canceled it and they'd never mentioned it. All this time I'd been paying the majority of their mortgage without even realizing it, on top of the education money I sent separately. There's more, Sharon said, pulling out another document. The property taxes and homeowners insurance are paid annually from your account as well, about $15,000 per year. I sat back, stunned. I had no idea. Jessica never said anything about these continuing payments. Based on my calculations, Sharon said, consulting a notepad, between the down payment, your portion of the mortgage, property taxes, and insurance, You've contributed approximately $387,000 to this property over the past 5 years. The number hit me like a physical blow, nearly $400,000, a significant portion of my retirement savings, invested in a home where I was now considered a burden. And the education money? I asked weakly. That's separate. The $3,000 monthly payments you mentioned would total around $180,000 over 5 years. Sharon removed her glasses. Maggie, combining everything, you've provided over $500,000 to your daughter's family. I closed my eyes, letting the magnitude of this revelation wash over me. All those years of careful saving with Robert, all those extra tutoring hours and coupon clipping, had gone towards supporting Jessica and Eric's lifestyle, a lifestyle that now had no room for me. What are my options? I finally asked. Sharon leaned back in her chair. Several. As a joint tenant, you could demand compensation for your ownership interest, essentially forcing Jessica to buy you out. Given the current market value of the property and your contributions, that would likely be around $400,000 to $450,000. Jessica and Eric don't have that kind of money, I said. Then they would need to sell the house and split the proceeds with you. Or they could take out a home equity loan to pay you. Sharon paused. Alternatively, you could petition the court for partition, which would force a sale if you can't agree. On terms. The options felt so drastic, so final. I don't want to make them homeless, I said quietly. There are less nuclear options, Sharon assured me. You could renegotiate the ownership arrangement. Convert the joint tenancy to a formal landlord-tenant relationship with you as the landlord. Or establish a written agreement acknowledging your contributions and defining expectations going forward. I nodded, thinking. And if I do nothing? Then nothing changes legally. You continue paying for a substantial portion of their housing costs. They continue treating you however they choose, and your investment remains at risk if their financial situation deteriorates further. I picked up my purse, suddenly feeling exhausted. Thank you, Sharon. I need some time to think about all this. Of course. She handed me a folder with copies of all the relevant documents. One more thing, Maggie. The education money. Have you verified it's actually going to the twins' schooling? I blinked. What do you mean? Private elementary education in Lexington averages about $25,000 annually per child. You're sending $36,000 per year. Have you seen any tuition statements? Receipts? The question landed like a punch to the gut. No, I admitted. I trusted Jessica. Sharon's expression softened. I'm not suggesting anything improper, but as your attorney, I have to advise you to verify how your money is being used. I left Sharon's office in a daze, clutching the folder of documents that laid bare the true extent of my financial entanglement with Jessica and Eric. The winter air bit at my face as I walked to my car, but I barely noticed the cold. My mind was too busy processing everything I'd learned. That evening, I spread the documents across my dining table, creating a paper trail of my generosity and perhaps my naivety. The mortgage statements showing my automatic payments, the property tax receipts in my name, the deed with Jessica and me as joint tenants. My phone remained silent. No calls from Jessica. No texts asking about the twins' gifts. Nothing but a cold void where family should be. I opened my laptop and navigated to my online banking portal. 5 years of transaction history unfolded before me, a digital record of maternal love expressed through consistent financial support. I clicked on the education payments, tracking them backward through time. $3,000 every month transferred to an account I'd been told was for the twins' schooling. I searched my email for any documentation Jessica might have sent. Tuition statements, enrollment confirmations, anything. Nothing. On impulse, I Googled Lexington Academy, the private school where Emma and Ethan supposedly attended. Their website listed current tuition as $2,500 per child annually, or $1,875 per month for both children combined. My payments exceeded that by over $1,000 every month. With growing unease, I picked up my phone and called the school directly. Lexington Academy, this is Patricia speaking. Hello? I said, my mouth suddenly dry. My name is Margaret Sullivan. I'm calling to verify my grandchildren's enrollment. Emma and Ethan Reynolds? The sound of typing came through the line. I'm sorry, we don't have any students by those names currently enrolled. Could you check again? They're twins, age 10. Their parents are Jessica and Eric Reynolds. More typing. No, I'm sorry. We have no record of those students. Is it possible they attend one of our sister schools? Perhaps, I said weakly. Thank you for checking. I hung up and sat motionless, staring at the wall. The twins weren't attending Lexington Academy. Had they ever? Where was my $3,000 per month actually going? With trembling fingers, I opened my browser and searched for Lexington Public Schools enrollment verification. A few clicks later, I was looking at the public school directory. I entered the twins' names, and there they were, Emma and Ethan Reynolds, grade 4, Washington Elementary, a public school, free of charge. I closed my laptop and poured myself a large glass of wine. The pieces were falling into place, a puzzle I'd never wanted to solve, revealing a picture I'd never wanted to see. My daughter and son-in-law had been systematically taking advantage of my generosity, using me as an ATM while pushing me further from their lives. The question now wasn't whether I should act, but how. And when I did, I would need to be prepared for the fallout. Because one thing had become painfully clear: the family I thought I had, the daughter I believed I'd raised, existed only in my imagination. 3 days passed without a word from Jessica or Eric. 3 days of carrying the weight of betrayal, of sorting through emotions that ranged from white-hot anger to hollow sadness. The Christmas presents for the twins remained in my guest room closet, untouched. The calendar moved forward to a new year, but I remained frozen in the moment of discovery. On New Year's Eve, as neighbors in my condo complex gathered for a party, in the community room, I sat alone at my kitchen table with a legal pad, a calculator, and a determination to reclaim my dignity. The sounds of laughter and music filtered through my walls as I worked methodically, adding columns of numbers, drafting options, creating a blueprint for what came next. By midnight, as cheers and noisemakers celebrated fresh beginnings, I had formulated a plan, one that would force Jessica and Eric to face the reality of their actions without destroying my relationship with my grandchildren. The first step was to stop the bleeding. I logged into my bank account and canceled all automatic transfers to Jessica and Eric's accounts, effective immediately. No more mortgage contributions. No more education payments. No more subsidizing a lifestyle built on deception. Next, I drafted a formal letter with Sharon's guidance, outlining my position as joint tenant of the property and my expectations moving forward. I would not demand immediate repayment of the money I'd contributed under false pretenses. I would not force them to sell the house and disrupt the twins' lives. But I would insist on honesty, respect, and formal acknowledgement of my role in their financial stability. The most difficult part was deciding how to handle the emotional aspect, how to confront my daughter about her betrayal without severing our relationship completely. For that, I sought advice from someone who had known Jessica even longer than I had. She's always been headstrong, Linda Parker said, stirring her coffee across from me at the small cafe where we'd met for lunch. Linda had been Jessica's kindergarten teacher and later became one of my closest friends during my teaching years. Now retired and widowed like me, she had wisdom that came from raising 3 children of her own, all successful adults who called her weekly and visited regularly. Headstrong is one thing, I replied. Dishonesty is another. They've been taking advantage of me for years, Linda, using me while pushing me away. Linda reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Children sometimes take the path of least resistance. Jessica found it easier to accept your money than to live within their means. And easier to lie than to set boundaries honestly. How? Do I make her understand what she's done without losing her entirely? Linda considered this. You need leverage, Maggie. Something that forces her to listen, truly listen, before she can react defensively. I have leverage, I said, thinking of the joint tenancy agreement, but I don't want to use it like a weapon. Then use it as a mirror, Linda suggested. Sometimes people need to see their own reflection clearly before they can change. That afternoon, I made one more stop before implementing my plan. Darrington. Elementary school was quiet during winter break, but the administrative office remained open for limited hours. I walked in and approached the front desk, where a young woman looked up from her computer. Can I help you? I hope so, I said, summoning my warmest teacher smile. I'm Margaret Sullivan, Emma and Ethan Reynolds' grandmother. I'd like to add myself as an approved pickup person for them. Of course, she said, typing something into her computer. Let me pull up their information. That's strange. Is something wrong? She frowned slightly. You're already listed as an emergency contact, but there's a note here that you're not approved for pickup without parental notification. The revelation stung. Jessica had specifically instructed the school not to release the children to me without her permission. Another betrayal. Another boundary I hadn't known existed. I see, I said, maintaining my composure. Their mother must have forgotten to update that. We've had a change in family arrangements recently. Would it be possible to leave a note requesting an update? Of course, she said, seemingly relieved to have a solution. I'll make a note for the file. As I left the school, a new determination strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about my place in my grandchildren's lives. A place that Jessica and Eric had been systematically minimizing while happily accepting my financial support. That evening, I sent a text message to Jessica. We need to talk. All of us, tomorrow at 2 p.m., my place. Her response came quickly. Can't tomorrow. Eric has a golf thing. Typical. I typed back, this isn't optional, unless you'd prefer I come to your house, the house I jointly own and have been paying the mortgage on for 5 years. Silence. Then, fine, 2 p.m. The next day, I prepared carefully. I set out coffee and the twins' favorite cookies in the living room. I arranged my documentation in neat stacks on the dining table. Mortgage statements, bank transfers, the deed, the school records I'd obtained. Evidence too concrete to deny or dismiss. At 1:55 p.m., my doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and opened the door. Jessica stood alone on my doorstep, her expression a mixture of defiance and apprehension. Eric couldn't make it, she said flatly. He had an emergency at work. I wasn't surprised. Come in. She stepped inside, glancing around as if expecting a trap. Where are the twins' Christmas presents? You said you wanted to give them their gifts. I never said that, I replied calmly. I said we needed to talk, all of us. But I suppose Eric's absence is convenient. It allows him to distance himself from this conversation. Jessica's posture stiffened. If this is about Christmas again, it's not about Christmas, I interrupted. Though that was certainly the catalyst. This is about honesty, Jessica. About respect. About the true nature of our relationship for the past 5 years. I gestured toward the dining table with its orderly rows of documents. Jessica's eyes widened slightly as she took in the scene. What is all this? Evidence, I said simply. Documentation of every dollar I've contributed to your lifestyle. Every payment I've made that you've either misrepresented or concealed. Her face paled. Mom, I don't know what you think. Please, I said, my voice firm but not unkind. Don't lie to me again. Sit down. It's time we had an honest conversation about the house, the money, and your children's education. Jessica sank into a chair, her eyes now fixed on the documents before her. I sat across from her, sliding the mortgage statements forward first. Did you know I've been paying 54% of your mortgage every month for the past 5 years? I asked. She swallowed visibly. We always knew you helped with the down payment. That's not what I asked, I said evenly. Did you know that the majority of your monthly mortgage payment comes directly from my account? An arrangement that was supposed to be temporary until Eric's partnership came through? Jessica stared at the statements, her silence answering my question. And what about this? I pushed forward bank statements showing my monthly $3,000 transfers. You told me this was for the twins' private school tuition, but they attend Washington Elementary, a public school, free of charge. A flush crept up her neck. We were saving it for their college fund, she said weakly. Are you? I asked. Because I checked with 3 local banks. There's no 529 plan or education savings account in either of the twins' names. Tears welled in Jessica's eyes, but I wasn't finished. I needed her to understand the full scope of what had happened. For 5 years, you've accepted over $500,000 from me while simultaneously pushing me further from your lives, excluding me from holidays, instructing the school not to release the children to me without notification, treating me as a burden when I'm the one who's been carrying your financial weight. A tear slipped down Jessica's cheek. Mom, I'm not done, I said, my voice still steady. I've stopped all payments, effective immediately. No more mortgage contributions. No more monthly transfers. From now on, your lifestyle will need to match your actual income, not your income plus my retirement savings. Jessica's head snapped up, panic replacing shame in her eyes. You can't do that. We'll lose the house. That, I said, is where you're mistaken. I slid the final document toward her, the deed showing our joint tenancy. I'm not just a contributor, Jessica. I'm a legal co-owner of your home, and we have some decisions to make about what happens next. Jessica stared at the deed, her fingers trembling as they traced the line with our names. The color had drained from her face, leaving behind a pallor that highlighted the dark circles under her eyes. For a moment, the only sound in my condo was the ticking of the grandfather clock Robert had restored decades ago. You've known this all along, she finally whispered. Not a question, an accusation. Yes, I said simply. And so did you. You were sitting right beside me in Sharon Leibowitz's office when we signed the papers. You nodded when she explained the joint tenancy arrangement. I didn't understand what it meant. Jessica's voice rose sharply. I thought it was just paperwork. Legal formalities because you gave us the down payment. It was never a gift, I reminded her. It was an investment in a property I would co-own, a property where I was promised I would always be welcome. I paused, letting the irony settle between us. A promise that apparently expired when it became inconvenient. Jessica pushed back from the table abruptly. So this is your revenge? Cut us off financially, then what? Evict us? Force us to sell? Make my children homeless because you're angry about Christmas? Her tendency to catastrophize, to jump immediately to the worst-case scenario, was so familiar, it almost made me smile. Jessica had been this way since childhood, turning minor setbacks into impending doom. But this wasn't a forgotten permission slip or a missed curfew. This was the consequence of years of calculated deception. No one is being evicted, I said calmly. I'm not trying to punish you, Jessica. I'm trying to reset our relationship on honest terms. By threatening our home? By clarifying the reality of your situation. I gathered the documents into a neat pile. The reality is that your lifestyle has been subsidized by my retirement savings for years. The reality is that you and Eric have been living beyond your means and lying to me about where my money was going. Jessica sank back into her chair, a different emotion flickering across her face. Fear. Eric doesn't know, she said quietly. That surprised me. Doesn't know what? About the joint tenancy. About your name on the deed. She looked up, eyes pleading. Mom, he thinks his name is on the property. I never told him otherwise. The revelation hung in the air between us. This wasn't just about Jessica and Eric deceiving me. Jessica had been deceiving her husband as well. Why would you hide that from him? I asked. Jessica looked away. Eric is proud. He wouldn't have accepted the house if he knew he wouldn't be an owner. He thinks the down payment was a gift from you to both of us. She bit her lip. And he doesn't know about the monthly mortgage payment either. I told him I was handling all the finances. The pieces began to click into place. Eric's hostility toward me wasn't just entitlement, it was ignorance. He genuinely believed they had achieved their lifestyle on their own, with only occasional help from me. And the education money? I pressed. Where has that been going, if not to the twins' schooling or college fund? Jessica's silence spoke volumes. Jessica, I said, a new urgency in my voice. What have you been doing with $3,000 a month for? 5 years, she covered her face with her hands. I've been paying off Eric's gambling debts, she whispered through her fingers. The admission hit me like a physical blow. Gambling debts. My money, meant for Emma and Ethan's education, had been funneled to bookies and casinos. How long has this been going on? I managed to ask. Since before the partnership, Jessica said, still hiding behind her hands. It started with sports betting in law school, then online poker. He'd stop for a while, then start again. The firm doesn't know. If they found out, he'd lose his position, I finished for her. The prestigious law firm where Eric worked had strict ethical standards for its partners. Gambling addiction would be seen as a liability, a potential path to financial misconduct. Mom, please. Jessica finally looked up, her face streaked with tears. If you stop the payments, if you tell him about the deed, I don't know what he'll do. He's been under so much pressure lately. The firm's been watching him since he lost the Mercer account. A sudden, terrible thought occurred to me. Jessica, has Eric ever been physical with you? Or the twins? No, she said quickly. Too quickly. Nothing like that. He gets angry, throw things sometimes, but never at us. Not yet, I thought grimly. But financial pressure had a way of escalating tensions, and a man with a gambling problem facing the collapse of his carefully constructed facade might become unpredictable. Where are the twins now? I asked. At my friend Kayla's house, a play date. Jessica wiped her face. They don't know anything about any of this. They just think we're having money problems because of Christmas expenses. I nodded, my teacher's instinct to protect children kicking in. And they're safe there? Kayla can keep them a bit longer? Jessica frowned, confused by my shift in focus. Yes, until dinner time. Why? Because we need to talk to Eric. Today. Together. I reached for my phone. Call him. Tell him to meet us here. It's time for complete honesty about the house, the money, and his gambling. Mom, no! Jessica's eyes widened in panic. You can't tell him. He'll lose everything. His job, his reputation. He might leave us. And if he continues gambling, if he accumulates debts you can't hide. I countered. What happens to Emma and Ethan then? Jessica fell silent, the impossible weight of her situation visibly crushing her shoulders. I won't stand by and watch my grandchildren's future be gambled away, I said firmly. Not by Eric, and not by you through your silence. We deal with this today, together, as a family. He won't come, Jessica whispered. Not if he knows what it's about. Then don't tell him what it's about. I stood, gathering my resolve. Tell him I've had a change of heart, that I want to apologize for the Christmas misunderstanding and discuss increasing my financial support. Jessica looked up at me with a mixture of disbelief and growing understanding. You want to lure him here under false pretenses? I want him here for an honest conversation, I corrected. How we get him here is less important than what happens when he arrives. She hesitated, then picked up her phone with shaking hands. I listened as she crafted a story about reconciliation and additional financial support, her voice steadying as Eric apparently responded positively. He'll be here in 30 minutes, she said after hanging up. He was already out running errands. Nearby. I nodded, feeling a strange calm settle over me. Good. That gives us time to discuss how we handle this. Jessica, I need to know you'll stand with me when I confront him about the gambling. Can I count on you to put the twins' well-being first? Jessica stared down at her wedding ring, twisting it nervously. What if he denies it? Do you have proof? Bank statements? Communications with bookies or online gambling sites? She nodded slowly. On my phone. I've been keeping records, just in case. In case what? Jessica's eyes met mine, and I saw in them the frightened child she'd once been, coming to me with scraped knees and broken toys, trusting me to fix everything. In case something happened to me, she said softly. So you would know why. The admission chilled me to the bone. My daughter had been living in fear, not just of financial ruin, but of something worse. Jessica, I said, moving to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands in mine. Why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you tell me what was really happening? A tear slipped down her cheek. Because I was ashamed. Because I thought I could fix it myself. Because I didn't want you to think you'd raised someone who would make such terrible choices. I squeezed her hands gently. I'm your mother. That hasn't changed, no matter how much distance you've tried to put between us. I would have helped you, without judgment, without conditions. I know that now, she whispered. And I'm sorry, Mom, for everything. The doorbell rang, its cheerful chime incongruous with the gravity of the moment. Jessica stiffened, her eyes darting to the door. He's early, she said, panic edging back into her voice. I stood, straightening my sweater and squaring my shoulders. Let him in. It's time we all face the truth. As Jessica moved toward the door, I quickly gathered the financial documents from the table, leaving only the property deed in plain sight. Whatever happened next would change all our lives, and I was determined to ensure it changed them for the better, especially for Emma and Ethan. The door opened, and Eric's voice boomed with false joviality. There's my two favorite ladies. Ready to talk about increasing that monthly stipend? I took a deep breath and turned to face him, ready for the confrontation that would finally bring everything into the light. Eric Reynolds strode into my condo like a man without a care in the world. His cashmere sweater and designer jeans spoke of affluence, his polished smile of confidence. But I noticed the telltale signs of stress beneath the carefully maintained facade. The slight twitch at the corner of his eye, the tightness in his jaw, the way his gaze darted quickly around the room, assessing. Maggie, he said warmly, extending his arms as if for a hug I had no intention of giving. Jessica said you've had a change of heart. I knew you'd come around. I stepped back slightly, maintaining distance between us. Have a seat, Eric. We have a lot to discuss. His smile faltered at my tone, but he recovered quickly, settling onto the sofa with practiced ease. Before we get into the details of the new arrangement, I want to say I appreciate your reconsidering. Family should stick together, right? Jessica perched on the edge of an armchair, hands clasped tightly in her lap, eyes downcast. Her posture, hunched, defensive, contrasted sharply with Eric's sprawling confidence. Family, I repeated, the word hanging in the air between us. Yes, let's talk about family, and honesty, and trust. Eric's smile dimmed slightly. Look, if this is still about Christmas, we can arrange something different next year. Maybe rotate holidays or— This isn't about Christmas, I interrupted, picking up the property deed from the table. This is about the truth, Eric. The truth about your house, your finances, and your gambling debts. The transformation was immediate. His expression froze, the confident smile shattering like thin ice on a winter pond. His eyes darted to Jessica, who seemed to shrink further into herself. "What is she talking about?" he demanded, his voice suddenly hard. When Jessica didn't answer, I continued, "I've recently discovered some disturbing facts. First, that my name is on the deed to your house as joint tenant with Jessica. You're not on the deed at all, Eric." He blinked rapidly, processing this information. "That's ridiculous. Of course my name is on the deed. I signed the closing papers." "You signed the mortgage as a borrower," I clarified, sliding the deed toward him. "But the property itself is owned jointly by Jessica and me. Always has been." Eric snatched up the document, scanning it with the trained eye of a lawyer. His face flushed deep red as he confirmed what I'd said. "Jessica," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Did you know about this?" She nodded almost imperceptibly, still not meeting his gaze. "And there's more," I continued, keeping my voice steady. "I've been paying 54% of your mortgage every month for the past 5 years. The property taxes and insurance come directly from my account as well. In total, I've contributed nearly $400,000 to your housing costs, not including the down payment." "This is absurd," Eric sputtered, though the certainty in his voice was crumbling. "Jessica handles all the household finances. I transfer my portion of the mortgage to her account each month." "And what does she do with it?" I asked. "Because it's certainly not covering all your housing expenses." Eric turned to Jessica, who had finally raised her head, tears streaming silently down her face. "What is she talking about?" he demanded. "What have you been doing with my money?" "It wasn't enough," Jessica whispered. "It was never enough, Eric. Not with your gambling." The color drained from his face. "You told her? You promised you'd never—" "I didn't have to tell her," Jessica interrupted, finding her voice at last. "She figured it out when she discovered the $3,000 monthly payments weren't going to the twins' education." Eric's head swiveled back to me, panic now evident in his eyes. "Maggie, listen. Whatever Jessica's told you, she hasn't told me anything yet," I said calmly. "But she's going to, today. We all are. No more secrets, no more lies." Eric stood abruptly, pacing the small confines of my living room like a caged animal. "This is ridiculous. I made one mistake years ago. A few bad bets. It's under control. Now—" Jessica pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling as she unlocked it and navigated to an app. "Is $7,000 to DraftKings last week under control?" she asked, her voice gaining strength. "Or the $12,000 to your bookie the month before? Or the cash advances on our credit cards that put us at 29% interest?" Eric lunged for the phone, but Jessica was quicker, clutching it to her chest and backing away. "Don't," she warned. "I have backup copies of everything. The bank statements, the text messages, the threatening calls from collectors." He froze, staring at her as if seeing her for the first time. "You've been spying on me?" "I've been protecting our children," she shot back. "Someone had to." I watched the exchange with a growing sense of clarity. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about power, control, and the terrible damage secrets can inflict on a family. "Sit down, Eric," I said firmly. "We're going to have a rational discussion about what happens next." "Nothing happens next," he snapped. "This is between Jessica and me. You have no right to interfere in our marriage." "I have every right to protect my investment," I countered, "and to ensure my grandchildren's well-being. Or would you prefer I contact the managing partners at your firm to discuss your gambling problem? I believe Harrison Prescott still plays golf with my brother-in-law." The threat landed precisely as intended. Eric sank back onto the sofa, defeated. The mention of his firm's senior partner, and my connection to him, had pierced his armor of denial. "What do you want?" he asked dully. "I want the truth," I said. "All of it. How much do you owe? Who do you owe it to? And what's your plan for resolving it without destroying your family in the process?" Eric looked at Jessica, perhaps hoping for a reprieve, but she stared back steadily, waiting. Something passed between them, a recognition that the facade they'd maintained for so long had finally crumbled. "About 80,000, he admitted, his voice barely audible. "Spread across 3 bookies and some online sites." Jessica gasped. 80? You told me it was 40 last month. It escalated recently. Eric ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, disheveling it. I thought I could win it back. There was this sure thing. "Stop," I interrupted. "There are no sure things in gambling. That's the first thing you need to acknowledge if you're ever going to recover from this addiction." "I'm not an addict," he protested reflexively. I exchanged a glance with Jessica, who shook her head slightly. Denial, the constant companion of addiction. "Eric," I said gently, "you've jeopardized your career, your marriage, your children's future, and your financial stability. If that's not an addiction, what would you call it?" He had no answer. Instead, he stared down at his hands, the fight draining out of him. "Here's what happens next," I continued, my voice firm but not unkind. "First, all the financial deception stops. Today. Jessica, you'll show Eric every account, every statement, every source of income and expenditure. Eric, you'll disclose every debt, every gambling account, every credit card." They both nodded. Mutely. "Second, Eric enters a treatment program for gambling addiction. Non-negotiable. I'll help find one that allows him to continue working, but recovery must be his top priority." Eric opened his mouth to protest, then closed it again, resignation settling over his features. "Third, we restructure the housing situation. The joint tenancy remains in place, but you'll both sign a formal acknowledgement of my ownership interest and my ongoing contribution to the mortgage." Jessica looked up, hope flickering across her tear-stained face. "You're not going to make us sell the house?" "No," I assured her. "I don't want to disrupt the twins' lives. But from now on, my financial support comes with transparency and accountability." I turned to Eric. "And fourth, you open your accounts to monitoring. By Jessica, by me, and by a financial counselor who specializes in gambling recovery. No more secrets." The grandfather clock chimed softly, marking the hour. Outside, the winter afternoon was fading into early darkness. Inside, a different kind of darkness, one that had been growing for years, was finally being exposed to light. "If I do all this," Eric said after a long silence, "what happens to the money, the monthly transfers you've been sending?" I smiled thinly. "That's the final point. My financial support will continue, but with one critical difference. Every dollar will go directly into trust accounts for Emma and Ethan's education, accounts that neither you nor Jessica can access without my signature." Eric nodded slowly, absorbing the new reality. "And the mortgage?" "I'll continue my portion," I said, "but you'll need to adjust your lifestyle to cover your share without my additional subsidies. No more country clubs, no more luxury cars, no more weekends in Nantucket." Jessica reached for Eric's hand, and after a moment's hesitation, he took it. A small gesture, but perhaps the beginning of something more honest between them. "We can do this," she said softly. "We can be better. For the twins." As I watched them sitting there, my daughter and her husband, stripped of pretense and facing their reality for perhaps the first time, I felt a complex mixture of sorrow, hope, and determination. The path forward wouldn't be easy. Addiction rarely surrenders without a fight. Financial habits don't change overnight. and the wounds of betrayal take time to heal. But something had shifted fundamentally in that room. The burden I had carried wasn't mine alone anymore. And for the first time in years, I felt like my daughter might finally see me not as an ATM or an inconvenience, but as the mother who had never stopped loving her, even when that love required the harshest kind of honesty. January in New England brings a particular kind of silence, a hush that falls over the landscape after holiday chaos subsides. The world becomes monochrome, stark branches etched against pale skies, everything pared down to essentials. It's a season of clarity, of seeing things as they truly are without ornament or disguise. 3 weeks had passed since the confrontation in my living room. 3 weeks of difficult conversations, painful admissions, and tentative steps toward rebuilding what had been broken. The path wasn't smooth or straight, but at least we were moving forward with our eyes open. Eric had enrolled in a gambling recovery program, an intensive outpatient treatment that allowed him to continue working while attending therapy sessions 3 evenings a week. He'd been resistant at first, his pride battling with the reality of his situation. But after a particularly difficult session with a financial counselor, during which the full extent of his losses over the years was calculated, nearly $300,000, even he couldn't deny the severity of his problem. It feels like waking up from a fog, he admitted during a quiet dinner at my condo, the first time the 4 of us, Eric, Jessica, the twins, and I, had gathered since everything had changed. I kept thinking I was in control, that the next win would fix everything. That's how addiction works, I said, not unkindly. It rewires your thinking until the irrational seems perfectly logical. Emma and Ethan were playing a board game in the living room, blissfully unaware of the gravity of the adult conversation happening just a few feet away. We'd agreed to shield them from the worst of it, explaining only that Daddy was getting help with some grown-up problems and that there would be some changes to their lifestyle. The hardest part, Eric continued, lowering his voice further, has been facing the firm, telling Harrison about the gambling. That had been my ultimatum, complete honesty, even professionally. A hard line, but necessary. The alternative, discovery during a routine audit or background check, would have ended his career entirely. How did he take it? I asked, genuinely curious. Harrison Prescott had a reputation for being ruthlessly demanding but fair. Better than I deserved, Eric admitted. He's put me on probation. No client trust accounts for 6 months. Weekly check-ins with the firm's ethics council. But I still have my job, provided I stay clean and keep up with treatment. Jessica reached for his hand across the table. A small gesture, but meaningful. Their relationship was fragile now, trust damaged by years of deception on both sides. But I saw something in their interaction that gave me hope. A new honesty, a willingness to face difficult truths together, rather than sweeping them under expensive rugs. And the finances? I asked, directing the question to Jessica. She straightened, pulling a folder from her bag. I've been working with the financial counselor you recommended. We've consolidated all the gambling debts and worked out a 3-year repayment plan. She slid the folder toward me. Inside was a detailed spreadsheet. Income, expenses, debt payments, all meticulously categorized and projected forward. It was a stark document, one that left no room for the luxuries they'd once taken for granted. We're selling the BMW, she continued. Eric's going to drive my Subaru, and I found a used Honda within our budget. We've canceled the country club membership, the meal delivery service, the housekeeping service, everything non-essential. And the house? I asked. We hadn't yet fully resolved the property situation. We can manage the mortgage payments with your continued contribution, Jessica said carefully. If that's still something you're willing to do. I nodded. As we discussed, I'll maintain my portion of the mortgage payments, but the property remains in both our names, and all financial assistance beyond that goes directly into trusts for the twins. We'd established those trusts immediately, after the confrontation. 2 separate educational accounts with Sharon Leibowitz as co-trustee. The $15,000 I'd already deposited would grow over time, ensuring that Emma and Ethan would have options for college regardless of their parents' financial situation. "Mom," Jessica said softly, "I never properly apologized for how we treated you, for excluding you at Christmas, for lying about the money, for making you feel unwelcome in our lives." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw not just the woman who had hurt me, but the child I had raised, the teenager who had rebelled, the young adult who had struggled to find her footing in the world. Layers upon layers of history between us, not all of it easy or kind. Apologies matter, I acknowledged, but actions matter more. What I want now is a genuine relationship. With you, with the twins, even with Eric. Not one based on financial dependency or obligation, but on mutual respect and honesty. "We're working on that," Eric said, and for once I believed him. The arrogance that had once infused his every word and gesture had given way to something humbler, more authentic. "I never properly thanked you for everything you've done for us, Maggie. Not just the money, but for forcing us to face reality before we lose everything." From the living room came the sound of children's laughter. Emma had apparently won the game, judging by her triumphant exclamation and Ethan's good-natured groan of defeat. "Grandma," Emma called, "come play with us. You can be on my team for the next round." The simple invitation warmed me more than she could possibly know. Before the confrontation, before the truth had come to light, I'd been gradually edged out of these casual interactions. Now I was being welcomed back into the circle of family, not as a financial resource, but as a grandmother. "Go ahead," Jessica urged with a small smile. "Eric and I will clean up here," as I joined the twins in the living room, settling cross-legged. On the floor beside them, I marveled at their resilience. Despite the tensions of recent weeks, despite the subtle changes in their lives, fewer new toys, more home-cooked meals instead of restaurant outings, conversations about saving for important things, they remained fundamentally themselves. Emma, strategic and determined. Ethan, creative and thoughtful. Both of them are innocent of the adult complexities swirling around them. "Grandma," Ethan asked as we set up the game board, "are you coming to our school play next month? I'm going to be a tree that talks." "A talking tree?" "That sounds very important," I said, my heart swelling. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." "Mom said you might help us practice our lines," Emma added. "She said you were the best English teacher ever, so you know all about plays and stuff." I glanced toward the kitchen where Jessica was washing dishes, her back to us, but I could see the slight tilt of her head, listening for my response. "I'd love to help," I said, loudly enough for Jessica to hear. "Maybe we could make it a regular thing, Sunday afternoons at Grandma's with script practice and cookies." "Yes," the twins chorused in unison. Later, as the family prepared to leave, Jessica hung back after Eric led the twins to the car. "Thanksy." "You," she said simply. "For not giving up on us, for being willing to rebuild." I embraced her, feeling the familiar contours of my daughter in my arms. "That's what family does," I replied. "The real kind, not the kind that only exists when it's convenient." She nodded against my shoulder. "I'm learning the difference." As I watched them drive away, I felt a sense of cautious optimism. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Eric's recovery would have setbacks. Financial pressures would create new tensions. Old patterns might resurface in moments of stress. But something fundamental had changed. The truth, painful as it had been, had cleared away the tangled underbrush of lies and resentments, creating space for something healthier to grow. I closed my door and returned to my quiet condo, no longer feeling like an outsider looking in at a family that didn't want me. Instead, I felt like what I truly was, the matriarch of a flawed, struggling, but ultimately resilient family that was finally learning the true meaning of home. Spring in Lexington brought renewal, cherry blossoms dotting the historic downtown, daffodils pushing through soil in manicured gardens, and families emerging from winter hibernation to enjoy the lengthening days. For our family, that renewal went deeper than the changing seasons. 6 months after the confrontation that had changed everything, we were growing into something different, something more authentic, if still imperfect. I stood on the sidelines of the soccer field, watching Ethan dart across the grass with unexpected agility for a boy who'd once preferred books to balls. Emma sat beside me on the bleachers, nose buried in a dog-eared astronomy guide, occasionally glancing up to cheer for her brother. "Did you see that move, Grandma?" she asked, pointing as Ethan executed a neat pass to a teammate. "He's been practicing that all week in the backyard." "I did see," I confirmed, snapping a photo with my phone. "He's really improved since the season started." Jessica arrived midway through the first half, slightly breathless, her work badge still clipped to her blouse. One of the many changes of the past months had been her return to the workforce, not in marketing as before, but as an administrative assistant at a local medical office. The pay was modest, but the hours allowed her to be home when the twins finished school, and the health benefits supplemented what Eric's firm provided. "Sorry I'm late," she said, settling beside us. "Mrs. Abernathy had a billing issue that took forever to resolve. Did I miss anything?" "Just Ethan channeling his inner soccer star," I replied, making room for her on the bleacher. The small, ordinary interaction, a mother arriving at her son's game, a grandmother holding a space, felt precious in its normalcy. 6 months earlier, I might have been excluded from this scene entirely, or tolerated as a necessary financial backer, rather than welcomed as family. Eric was noticeably absent, but not for the reasons one might have assumed months ago. He wasn't at a clandestine gambling venue or avoiding family obligations. He was attending his twice-monthly meeting with his recovery sponsor, a commitment he'd maintained with surprising diligence since entering treatment. "Eric sends his apologies," Jessica said, as if reading my thoughts. "He hated missing Ethan's game, but Keith could only meet today." "Ethan understands," I assured her. "We talked about it on the way here. He's proud of his dad for sticking with the program." Jessica's eyes glistened slightly. "Sometimes I think the kids are handling all of this better than the adults. Children often do," I thought, but didn't say. "They adapt, they forgive, they move forward without the baggage adults accumulate like stones in their pockets, weighing them down." After the game, a respectable 2-2 tie, we treated Ethan to ice cream at the local creamery, a small celebration that fit within the family's new, more modest budget. The twins chattered about school projects and summer plans while Jessica and I listened, occasionally exchanging glances of shared amusement or pride. Later, as we walked back to our respective cars, Jessica linked her arm through mine, a casual gesture of affection that would have seemed impossible during the frost of our estrangement. "Mom," she said quietly, "would you be able to come over for dinner tomorrow? Eric and I have something we'd like to discuss with you." A flicker of apprehension moved through me. Despite the progress of recent months, old patterns of communication, specifically requests for discussions that turned out to be financial appeals, were hard to forget. "Of course," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Everything all right?" "Everything's fine," she assured me quickly. "Better than fine, actually. Just something we need to talk about as a family." The next evening, I arrived at the house on Winchester Lane with a homemade apple crisp, a simple dessert that had once been a family favorite before designer cupcakes and artisanal pastries had replaced our humbler traditions. The house itself looked subtly different from my last visit. The pretentious art pieces Eric had insisted on displaying had been replaced with family photos. The imported Italian leather sofa had given way to a comfortable sectional that showed signs of actual use. It felt less like a showroom and more like a home. After dinner, a hearty lasagna made from scratch, not the gourmet takeout of previous years, Eric cleared his throat and exchanged a significant look with Jessica. "We wanted to talk to you about the house," he began. "Here it comes," I thought, bracing myself. Despite the progress, despite the therapy and the recovery program and the budgeting sessions, I'd been waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the moment when financial reality forced a difficult conversation about the property. "We've been thinking a lot about what you did for us," Eric continued, surprising me with his direction. "How you helped us secure this home for the kids, how you've contributed to the mortgage all these years." Jessica took over seamlessly. "We've talked about it extensively, and we believe it's time to formalize our arrangement, to acknowledge your investment properly and ensure it's protected going forward." They slid a folder across the table. Inside was a legal document, a formal recognition of my ownership interest in the property, meticulously detailed and already signed by both Jessica and Eric. "We had this drawn up by an attorney at Eric's firm," Jessica explained. "It officially acknowledges that you own 54% of the property, corresponding to your contributions to date. It also establishes a framework for how decisions about the property will be made going forward." I skimmed the document, noting provisions for maintenance costs, future renovations, and even eventual sale proceeds. It was thorough, fair, and completely unexpected. "This is quite comprehensive," I said carefully. "There's more," Eric said, reaching for a second folder. "We've also established a repayment plan for the education money that was misdirected." He couldn't quite meet my eyes as he referenced the funds that had gone to gambling debts rather than the twins' schooling. It remained a source of shame for him, a painful reminder of how far he'd fallen. "We don't expect to repay the full amount immediately," Jessica clarified. "That's not realistic with our current finances, but we've calculated that we can contribute $500 monthly to the twins' education trusts as a start." I studied their faces, my daughter and her husband, sitting side by side, united in purpose rather than conspiracy. The change was remarkable. "What prompted this?" I asked finally. Eric answered, his voice steady but humble. "My recovery program emphasizes making amends, not just with words, but with actions. This is part of that process. And," Jessica added, "we want the twins to grow up understanding responsibility and integrity. How can we teach them those values if we're not living them ourselves?" I felt a complex swirl of emotions, pride in their growth, vindication of my tough love approach, and a quiet grief for what we'd all lost during the years of deception. "Have you considered how this will affect your daily finances?" I asked. $500 monthly is significant on your current income." "We've factored it in," Jessica assured me. "We've made additional cutbacks. No more housekeeping service. We're growing some of our own vegetables, and I've taken on some medical transcription work I can do from home in the evenings. And I've been approved to take on additional clients. At the firm," Eric added. "Not trust accounts yet, but enough to increase my billable hours." Their careful planning, their willingness to sacrifice comfort for integrity, touched me deeply. This wasn't a performance put on to secure more financial support. This was genuine change. Hard-won, painfully honest change. "I'm proud of you both," I said simply. "This can't have been easy." "It wasn't," Jessica admitted. "We argued about it, actually. Eric thought we should wait until we were in a stronger financial position. But I felt we needed to do this now, to make it real." Eric nodded ruefully. "She was right, as usual." The self-deprecating humor, the ability to admit he'd been wrong, these too were new developments, signs of the difficult inner work Eric had been doing in recovery. As we shared the apple crisp for dessert, the twins joining us at the table with homework temporarily set aside, I looked around at this family, my family, and marveled at how far we'd come. 6 months earlier, I'd been an outsider, a financial resource to be managed and occasionally tolerated. Now I was sitting at their table, integral to their lives and their future plans, not because of what I could give them, but because of who we were to each other. The house on Winchester Lane was still jointly owned. The financial entanglements remained complex. But something fundamental had shifted in how we viewed these connections, not as burdens or obligations, but as the visible manifestations of what family truly means: shared responsibility, mutual respect, and love that demands honesty rather than convenience. 2 years can transform a landscape, both the physical world and the emotional terrain of a family. As I stood in my kitchen arranging a fruit platter for the twins' 13th birthday celebration, I found myself reflecting on just how much had changed since that painful Christmas, when I'd been deemed a burden. Emma and Ethan were no longer children but emerging teenagers, their personalities blossoming in distinct directions. Emma had discovered a passion for environmental science, filling notebooks with observations from the conservation land behind their house. Ethan had found his voice in the school theater program, surprising us all with his confident performances. Both carried themselves with a groundedness I attributed partly to the family's journey through hardship into honesty. The doorbell chimed, interrupting my thoughts. I wiped my hands and went to greet my first guests. "Grandma," the twins chorused, enveloping me in hugs that felt different now. They were nearly my height, their embraces stronger but no less affectionate. Jessica followed, carrying a homemade cake decorated with constellations for Emma and theater masks for Ethan, a testament to her newfound domestic skills and attention to their individual interests. "Need any help in the kitchen, Mom?" she asked, setting down the cake and immediately moving to arrange serving plates without waiting for an answer. The easy familiarity of the gesture warmed me. Over the past 2 years, we'd developed a comfortable rhythm of mutual support, helping each other not out of obligation or financial necessity, but from genuine care. Eric arrived last, having come directly from the office. His appearance had subtly changed since beginning recovery. The designer clothes had given way to quality basics, maintained with care rather than regularly replaced. The flashy watch was gone, as was the artificial tan he'd once maintained. He looked more like himself, whoever that actually was beneath the layers of pretense he'd accumulated over the years. "Sorry I'm late," he said, setting down shopping bags containing wrapped presents. "Court ran over, and then I wanted to pick up the gifts myself rather than having them delivered." The casual reference to personal involvement in the gift selection, rather than outsourcing it to an assistant or delivery service, spoke volumes about his evolution. The celebration unfolded with the comfortable ease of a family that had learned to enjoy simple pleasures. We grilled burgers on my small patio, the twins regaling us with stories from middle school. After dinner, they opened presents, thoughtful items chosen with care rather than the extravagant electronics and designer clothing that might once have marked the occasion. My gift to Emma was a professional-grade telescope I'd researched extensively, knowing it would support her growing interest in astronomy. For Ethan, I'd found a vintage collection of Shakespeare's plays, annotated by a famous director, a nod to his theatrical aspirations. Both gifts represented significant expenses, but unlike the financial support I'd once provided unconsciously, these were intentional investments in their specific passions. As the evening wound down, the twins migrated to the living room to examine their gifts more closely. Jessica helped me load the dishwasher while Eric cleared the patio table, our movements choreographed by months of shared meals and cleanups. "Mom," Jessica said quietly, passing me a serving dish to rinse. "We wanted to talk to you about something important." The phrase no longer triggered anxiety as it once might have. We'd built enough trust that important conversations didn't automatically signal financial requests or manipulative tactics. "Of course," I replied, drying my hands. "Now?" Jessica nodded, catching Eric's eye through the patio door. He joined us at the kitchen island, his expression serious but not tense. "We've been discussing our housing situation," he began. As you know, we've managed to maintain the mortgage payments with your continued contribution to your portion. I nodded, waiting for them to continue. The thing is, Jessica picked up, we've realized the house is larger than we need. 5 bedrooms for 4 people, the formal dining room we rarely use, the third-floor bonus room. It's excessive, Eric said bluntly, and expensive to maintain, even with the adjustments we've made to our lifestyle. I studied their faces, noting the lack of desperation that might once have accompanied such a conversation. Are you considering selling? We are, Jessica confirmed. We've found a smaller house in the same school district, 3 bedrooms, more modest but still comfortable, with a lower price point and significantly reduced property taxes and utilities. The equity from selling Winchester Lane would allow us to buy the new place outright, Eric added. No mortgage, and given your ownership percentage, your share of the proceeds would be substantial. I absorbed this information, appreciating the careful consideration evident in their planning. This sounds well thought out, but what about the twins? Changing homes at their age can be disruptive. We've discussed it with them, Jessica said. Extensively, actually. They understand our reasons, that we're trying to live more authentically within our means. Emma's excited about the new house being closer to the conservation area, and Ethan likes that it has a finished basement he could use as a rehearsal space. They've watched us work through the financial challenges of the past 2 years, Eric added. They're surprisingly mature about it, more than I would have been at their age. I couldn't help but smile, thinking of the entitled, materialistic children they might have become in the alternate reality where the deceptions had continued unchecked. There's another aspect to this decision, Jessica said, her voice taking on a different quality. The new house has something the current one doesn't. What's that? I asked. An in-law suite, she replied, meeting my eyes directly. A separate living space with its own entrance, kitchenette, and full bath. I blinked, not immediately grasping her implication. We'd like you to consider living with us, Mom, she clarified. Not in a dependent way, but as part of our household. You'd have your privacy, your own space, but you'd also be present for daily life in a way that's been difficult with separate residences. The offer caught me completely off guard. After everything we'd been through, the exclusion, the confrontation, the painful rebuilding of trust, they were inviting me closer, not pushing me away. This isn't about finances, Eric hastened to add, perhaps seeing my hesitation. Your portion of the sale proceeds would more than cover the cost of customizing the in-law suite to your specifications. This is about family. We miss you when you're not around, Jessica said simply, and the twins would love having you there consistently. Emma mentioned just last week how she wishes you could help with her science fair project more regularly. I don't know what to say, I admitted, genuinely moved by the proposal. It's a significant change to consider. Of course, Jessica nodded. We don't need an answer tonight. We're still in the early stages of exploring the move. Just think about it. Later that evening, after they'd gone home, I sat on my balcony watching twilight settle over Lexington. The prospect of living with my daughter's family, not as a financial benefactor or an occasional visitor, but as an integral part of their daily lives, stirred complex emotions. 2 years earlier, I'd been explicitly uninvited from their Christmas celebration, deemed an inconvenience to be managed rather than family to be embraced. The pain of that exclusion had catalyzed a necessary reckoning, forcing us all to confront the unhealthy patterns that had defined our relationships. Now, in a twist I couldn't have anticipated, they were creating space for me. Physical space. In their future home. Emotional space in their reconfigured family structure. Not out of obligation or financial necessity, but from genuine desire for my presence. The following weekend, I visited the house they were considering. It was indeed more modest than the Winchester Lane property, a well-maintained colonial with a practical layout and a backyard that backed onto conservation land. The in-law suite occupied what had once been an attached garage, thoughtfully converted with high ceilings, ample natural light, and separate systems for heating and cooling. As we toured the space, I could envision making it my own, displaying the small collection of antiques Robert and I had cherished, setting up a reading nook by the bay window, perhaps even installing a small raised garden outside my private entrance. "What do you think?" Jessica asked as we stood in the potential in-law suite, the twins exploring the main house with Eric. "I think," I said slowly, "that this could work beautifully." 6 months later, we made the move official. The Winchester Lane house sold for significantly more than anticipated, providing Eric and Jessica with financial breathing room and me with the means to customize my new living space. We drafted clear agreements about shared expenses, privacy boundaries, and mutual expectations, lessons learned from our difficult history. The transition wasn't without challenges. Adjusting to proximity after years of independence required patience and communication from all of us. There were inevitable friction points, my early morning habits conflicting with their later schedule, differences of opinion about the twins' activities, the occasional need to assert boundaries. But the rewards far outweighed the adjustments. I was present for everyday moments that had once been invisible to me. Emma's excited recounting of a science experiment, Ethan rehearsing lines in the backyard, Jessica and Eric navigating the ordinary challenges of marriage with new tools and greater honesty. On Christmas Eve, exactly 3 years after the painful exclusion that had set everything in motion, we gathered in the main house's living room. A modest tree sparkled with ornaments, many handmade by the twins over the years. Presents were arranged beneath it, thoughtful rather than extravagant, selected with care rather than obligation. As I looked around at my family, Jessica and Eric on the sofa, the twins sprawled on the floor playing a board game, all of us together in a home that reflected our true values rather than artificial aspirations, I felt a sense of completion. The journey from being called a burden to becoming an essential part of this reconfigured family hadn't been easy or straightforward. It had required confronting painful truths, establishing firm boundaries, and rebuilding trust through consistent actions rather than empty promises. But sitting there, with the warm glow of belonging surrounding me, I understood a profound truth. Sometimes what appears to be rejection becomes the catalyst for authentic connection. Sometimes facing the truth about who owns what, whether property, responsibility, or the narrative of our lives, is the only path to genuine family bonds. I had shown my daughter who really owned her luxury home. But in the process, we had all discovered something far more valuable: the foundations of a family built on honesty, mutual respect, and love that doesn't come with a price tag attached. 2 years can transform a landscape, both the physical world and the emotional terrain of a family. As I stood in my kitchen arranging a fruit platter for the twins' 13th birthday celebration, I found myself reflecting on just how much had changed since that painful Christmas when I'd been deemed a burden. Emma and Ethan were no longer children but emerging teenagers, their personalities blossoming in distinct directions. Emma had discovered a passion for environmental science, filling notebooks with observations from the conservation land behind their house. Ethan had found his voice in the school theater program, surprising us all with his confident performances. Both carried themselves with a groundedness I attributed partly to the family's journey through hardship into honesty. The doorbell chimed, interrupting my thoughts. I wiped my hands and went to greet my first guests. "Grandma," the twins chorused, enveloping me in hugs that felt different now. They were nearly my height, their embraces stronger but no less affectionate. Jessica followed, carrying a homemade cake decorated with constellations for Emma and theater masks for Ethan, a testament to her newfound domestic skills and attention to their individual interests. "Need any help in the kitchen, Mom?" she asked, setting down the cake and immediately moving to arrange serving plates without waiting for an answer. The easy familiarity of the gesture warmed me. Over the past 2 years, we'd developed a comfortable rhythm of mutual support, helping each other not out of obligation or financial necessity, but from genuine care. Eric arrived last, having come directly from the office. His appearance had subtly changed since beginning recovery. The designer clothes had given way to quality basics, maintained with care rather than regularly replaced. The flashy watch was gone, as was the artificial tan he'd once maintained. He looked more like himself, whoever that actually was beneath the layers of pretense he'd accumulated over the years. "Sorry I'm late," he said, setting down shopping bags containing wrapped presents. "Court ran over, and then I wanted to pick up the gifts myself rather than having them delivered." The casual reference to personal involvement in the gift selection, rather than outsourcing it to an assistant or delivery service, spoke volumes about his evolution. The celebration unfolded with the comfortable ease of a family that had learned to enjoy simple pleasures. We grilled burgers on my small patio, the twins regaling us with stories from middle school. After dinner, they opened presents, thoughtful items chosen with care rather than the extravagant electronics and designer clothing that might once have marked the occasion. My gift to Emma was a professional-grade telescope I'd researched extensively, knowing it would support her growing interest in astronomy. For Ethan, I'd found a vintage collection of Shakespeare's plays, annotated by a famous director, a nod to his theatrical aspirations. Both gifts represented significant expenses, but unlike the financial support I'd once provided unconsciously, these were intentional investments in their specific passions. As the evening wound down, the twins migrated to the living room to examine their gifts more closely. Jessica helped me load the dishwasher while Eric cleared the patio table, our movements choreographed by months of shared meals and cleanups. "Mom," Jessica said quietly, passing me a serving dish to rinse, "we wanted to talk to you about something important." The phrase no longer triggered anxiety as it once might have. We'd built enough trust that important conversations didn't automatically signal financial requests or manipulative tactics. "Of course," I replied, drying my hands. "Now?" Jessica nodded, catching Eric's eye through the patio door. He joined us at the kitchen island, his expression serious but not tense. "We've been discussing our housing situation," he began. "As you know, we've managed to maintain the mortgage payments with your continued contribution to your portion." I nodded, waiting for them to continue. "The thing is," Jessica picked up, "we've realized the house is larger than we need. 5 bedrooms for 4 people, the formal dining room we rarely use, the 3rd-floor bonus room." "It's excessive," Eric said bluntly. "And expensive to maintain, even with the adjustments we've made to our lifestyle." I studied their faces, noting the lack of desperation that might once have accompanied such a conversation. "Are you considering selling?" "We are," Jessica confirmed. "We've found a smaller house in the same school district. 3 bedrooms, more modest but still comfortable, with a lower price point and significantly reduced property taxes and utilities. The equity from selling Winchester Lane would allow us to buy the new place outright," Eric added. "No mortgage, and given your ownership percentage, your share of the proceeds would be substantial." I absorbed this information, appreciating the careful consideration evident in their planning. This sounds well thought out, but what about the twins? Changing homes at their age can be disruptive. "We've discussed it with them," Jessica said. "Extensively, actually. They understand our reasons, that we're trying to live more authentically, within our means. Emma's excited about the new house being closer to the conservation area, and Ethan likes that it has a finished basement he could use as a rehearsal space. They've watched us work through the financial challenges of the past 2 years," Eric added. "They're surprisingly mature about it, more than I would have been at their age." I couldn't help but smile, thinking of the entitled, materialistic children they might have become in the alternate reality where the deceptions had continued unchecked. "There's another aspect to this decision," Jessica said, her voice taking on a different quality. "The new house has something the current one doesn't." "What's that?" I asked. "An in-law suite," she replied, meeting my eyes directly. A separate living space with its own entrance, kitchenette, and full bath. I blinked, not immediately grasping her implication. "We'd like you to consider living with us, Mom," she clarified. "Not in a dependent way, but as part of our household. You'd have your privacy, your own space, but you'd also be present for daily life in a way that's been difficult with separate residences." The offer caught me completely off guard. After everything we'd been through, the exclusion, the confrontation, the painful rebuilding of trust, they were inviting me closer, not pushing me away. "This isn't about finances," Eric hastened to add, perhaps seeing my hesitation. "Your portion of the sale proceeds would more than cover the cost of customizing the in-law suite to your specifications. This is about family." "We miss you when you're not around," Jessica said simply. "And the twins would love having you there consistently. Emma mentioned just last week how she wishes you could help with her science fair project more regularly." "I don't know what to say," I admitted, genuinely moved by the proposal. "It's a significant change to consider." "Of course," Jessica nodded. "We don't need an answer tonight. We're still in the early stages of exploring the move. Just think about it." Later that evening, after they'd gone home, I sat on my balcony watching twilight settle over Lexington. The prospect of living with my daughter's family, not as a financial benefactor or an occasional visitor, but as an integral part of their daily lives, stirred complex emotions. 2 years earlier, I'd been explicitly uninvited from their Christmas celebration, deemed an inconvenience to be managed rather than family to be embraced. The pain of that exclusion had catalyzed a necessary reckoning, forcing us all to confront the unhealthy patterns that had defined our relationships. Now, in a twist I couldn't have anticipated, they were creating space for me, physical space in their future home, emotional space in their reconfigured family structure, not out of obligation or financial necessity, but from genuine desire for my presence. The following weekend, I visited the house they were considering. It was indeed more modest than the Winchester Lane property, a well-maintained colonial with a practical layout and a backyard that backed onto conservation land. The in-law suite occupied what had once been an attached garage, thoughtfully converted with high ceilings, ample natural light, and separate systems for heating and cooling. As we toured the space, I could envision making it my own, displaying the small collection of antiques Robert and I had cherished, setting up a reading nook by the bay window, perhaps even installing a small raised garden outside my private entrance. "What do you think?" Jessica asked as we stood in the potential in-law suite, the twins exploring the main house with Eric. "I think," I said slowly, "that this could work beautifully." 6 months later, we made the move official. The Winchester Lane house sold for significantly more than anticipated, providing Eric and Jessica with financial breathing room and me with the means to customize my new living space. We drafted clear agreements about shared expenses, privacy, boundaries, and mutual expectations, lessons learned from our difficult history. The transition wasn't without challenges. Adjusting to proximity after years of independence required patience and communication from all of us. There were inevitable friction points, my early morning habits conflicting with their later schedule, differences of opinion about the twins' activities, the occasional need to assert boundaries, but the rewards far outweighed the adjustments. I was present for everyday moments that had once been invisible to me. Emma's excited recounting of a science experiment, Ethan rehearsing lines in the backyard, Jessica and Eric navigating the ordinary challenges of marriage with new tools and greater honesty. On Christmas Eve, exactly 3 years after the painful exclusion that had set everything in motion, we gathered in the main house's living room. A modest tree sparkled with ornaments, many handmade by the twins over the years. Presents were arranged beneath it, thoughtful rather than extravagant, selected with care rather than obligation. As I looked around at my family, Jessica and Eric on the sofa, the twins sprawled on the floor playing a board game, all of us, together in a home that reflected our true values rather than artificial aspirations, I felt a sense of completion. The journey from being called a burden to becoming an essential part of this reconfigured family hadn't been easy or straightforward. It had required confronting painful truths, establishing firm boundaries, and rebuilding trust through consistent actions rather than empty promises. But sitting there, with the warm glow of belonging surrounding me, I understood a profound truth. Sometimes what appears to be rejection becomes the catalyst for authentic connection. Sometimes facing the truth about who owns what, whether property, responsibility, or the narrative of our lives, is the only path to genuine family bonds. Had shown my daughter who really owned her luxury home, but in the process, we had all discovered something far more valuable: the foundations of a family built on honesty, mutual respect, and love that doesn't come with a price tag attached. 5 years after moving into our shared home, I celebrated my 70th birthday surrounded by family. The modest backyard was transformed with string lights and colorful lanterns, casting a warm glow as dusk settled around us. Friends from my teaching days mingled with neighbors and Jessica's colleagues, while the twins, now 15 and navigating the complex terrain of high school, took turns playing host with surprising maturity. Emma had blossomed into an environmental activist, already talking about marine biology programs for college. Ethan had discovered filmmaking, documenting family events with an artistic eye that captured not just images, but emotions. Both had grown up witnessing their parents' journey, from financial deception to hard-earned honesty, a lesson more valuable than any inheritance. Speech! Someone called Jessica brought out a cake adorned with 70 delicate candles. Maggie needs to give a speech. I hadn't prepared anything formal, but standing there, surrounded by genuine warmth rather than the hollow performance, a family that had once defined our gatherings, words came easily. 5 years ago, I began. I never could have imagined this moment, not because of my age, though 70 did seem impossibly distant then, but because of where we were as a family. Jessica and Eric exchanged glances, a silent acknowledgement of our shared history. We went through a difficult reckoning, I continued, one that forced us to examine what truly matters, what home really means, and how honesty builds foundations. That last while deception creates houses of cards that inevitably collapse. The small crowd had quieted, listening with the attention people give when they sense authentic emotion, rather than rehearsed platitudes. What I've learned in these 70 years, especially the last 5, is that family isn't defined by financial support or material possessions. It's built through daily choices to see each other clearly, to speak truthfully even when it's difficult, and to value connection over convenience. I looked at my grandchildren, their faces illuminated by candle glow. Emma and Ethan, the greatest gift you've received isn't anything material. It's watching your parents choose integrity over appearance, substance over status. Remember that lesson as you build your own lives. Later that evening, after guests had departed and dishes were cleared, Jessica joined me on the small patio outside my suite. The night air carried the scent of late summer flowers from the garden we'd planted together, a collaboration that symbolizes our rebuilt relationship. "That was a beautiful speech, Mom," she said, handing me a cup of herbal tea. "Though I kept worrying you might tell everyone exactly what prompted our difficult reckoning." I smiled, appreciating her ability to reference our painful past without flinching. "Some stories belong just to us." "I'm glad ours had a better ending than it might have," Jessica said quietly. "When I think about how close we came to losing everything, not just the house, but our relationship, Eric's career, the twins' security." "But you didn't lose those things," I reminded her. "Sometimes we need to come right to the edge of losing what matters to recognize its value." Jessica nodded, gazing at the night sky. "Eric and I were talking recently about what legacy means. Not just money or property, but the values we pass down. She turned to me. You've given us the most important legacy, Mom. The courage to face the truth, even when it's painful. The following morning, I found an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a legal document and a handwritten note from Jessica and Eric. Mom, today we're filing paperwork to rename our family trust in your honor. The Margaret Sullivan Family Trust. The sale proceeds from Winchester Lane that you allowed us to manage have grown over these 5 years through careful investment. This trust will fund Emma and Ethan's education and eventually help them begin their adult lives on solid footing. More importantly, we've documented our family's journey in a letter that will become part of the trust documents, the story of how you showed us the true meaning of ownership, responsibility, and forgiveness. The twins will receive this letter when they turn 21, ensuring your legacy of courage and integrity continues through generations. Thank you for not giving up on us when it would have been easier to walk away. With deepest love and gratitude, Jessica and Eric. As I carefully refolded the letter, I thought about legacies. Not the material kind that can be quantified in dollars and deeds, but the invisible inheritance of values and choices that shape generations. 5 years earlier, I'd been called a burden by the very family I'd sacrificed to support. That painful moment had forced a necessary revelation about who really owned what in our lives. Not just property, but responsibility for truth and the courage to insist on it. The real ownership was never about the house. It was about claiming the authentic relationships we deserved, refusing to accept deception as the price of belonging, and building something genuine from the ruins of what had been false. That was the legacy I would leave. Not a luxury home with my name on the deed, but a family rebuilt on honesty, where being truthful mattered more than being comfortable, and where love was expressed through respect rather than financial dependency. It was, I reflected as I tucked the letter away among my most treasured possessions, the richest inheritance I could possibly leave. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.